I'm Stuart Skelton. I'm singing Siegmund in the Act 1 concert of Die Walküre here with Arthur Fagan and Michel de Young and Peter Volpe.
So nice to have you, Stuart.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome to Bloomington and Indiana University.
Thank you very much.
And the Musical Arts Center.
What an incredible building. I mean, the whole campus. It's utterly stunning.
Thank you very much. We're very proud of it.
As you should be.
Stuart, of what larger operatic cycle is Die Walküre a part, and what is the cycle about broadly?
Ooh, good question. Die Walküre is part 2, or the second installment in a tetralogy, called The Ring of the Nibelungen, Der Ring des Nibelungens, which starts with a 4-evening, the way that Wagner described it was 3 evenings and a pre-evening. The first one is Das Rheingold, which talks about the gold at the bottom of the Rhine, literally, and how that gold gets taken away from the Rhine and used for other purposes, all of which begin a long and sad tale of death and destruction. Walküre is the description of the young brother and sister, twins, separated at birth, fathered by Wotan, or Odin, king of the gods, and how they come to find each other again, having been separated at birth, and then how that then affects what happens in Siegfried and Götterdämmerung, because Siegmund and Sieglinde Sieglinde ends up bearing Siegmund's son called Siegfried, and Siegfried, of course, defies the gods, breaks Wotan's spear, and that's once the spear of contracts is broken, then the whole thing starts to disintegrate, and the flames burn Valhalla to the ground, and the Rhine rises up and puts the fire out, and the gold goes back to the Rhine where it belongs 17 hours later.
It's somewhat of an original soap opera.
It is the original soap opera.
Let's get into Die Walküre a little bit more specifically. What is that legend that it's based upon?
Well, I guess it depends on how far you want to go back. The original legend is based on Siegmund's mother knowing that she had given birth to Siegmund and Sieglinde as twins, and she takes Siegmund away, but keeps sending Siegmund off into the forest, ostensibly to learn to negotiate with the natural world. What they don't tell you in the original one is that she kept all of the children that she'd had prior to Siegmund. She had sewn wolf skins onto them, and if they cried, she killed them. Siegmund was the first son that she had that didn't cry when she physically sewed a wolfskin onto him, and so she realized that he was the one. So take that Nordic mythology out of the equation. This is Wotan coming to Earth and bearing children in the hope that Siegmund would be the one to rescue the mistake he'd made in Rheingold by stealing the gold from Alberich to pay off the giants who built Valhalla. He broke contract, and he was the god of contracts. The spear he has from Yggdrasil, which is the world ash tree, had the runes of contract engraved into it, and by breaking the contract, the whole social contract between gods and man and dwarves and all the other various starts to disintegrate a little bit. And so he thinks that by having Siegmund is the independent hero, that can bring the gods back into their rightful place. He was wrong.
What is the dynamic like among Siegmund and Sieglinde, who is portrayed by your old pal, Michel de Young?
I know, I'm so excited.
And another one of our great faculty members, Peter Volpe, is
yes.
joining you. Yeah.
Very exciting.
How do those characters interact with each other?
It's a really great question, because people think of Wagner as this huge, incredibly broad palette, and it is. It's a massive canvas. But a lot of the time, particularly in Walküre, there's only 1 or 2, or occasionally 3 characters. And then at every point, one of those characters goes away and comes back, and then another one disappears. So it's a very sort of almost Ibsen-esque, very stifling family drama, just on a massive, massive, massive scale. And even if you go into Act 3, which we're not singing, of course, but if you take the Walküres, the famous Rite of the Valkyries, if you take them as a character, there's still only ever 3 people involved. Wotan and Brunhilde, Brunhilde and the Valkyries, Valkyries, Brunhilde and Sieglinde, and then Sieglinde escapes. The Valkyries get told to go away, then it's just Wotan and Brunhilde, and then Wotan leaves and it's the fire and she goes to sleep. So it's this tiny little, quite intense, suffocating family drama, just on a huge scale. And so Sieglinde and Siegmund don't know who they are to each other when they first encounter each other. Sieglinde is extremely unhappily married to Hunding. Well, in the tradition, Hunding's family arrived in a village and took the women as their wives, without being asked, or permission wasn't sought in the day. And so she's extremely unhappily married to somebody we think of as a brutal character. Siegmund comes into their lives at the beginning of Act 1, being chased by, turns out, Hunding's relatives. He didn't know that either. So it all gets quite intense and a little bit incestuous, but we've already covered that because they're twins.
And it's never too overtly portrayed.
No, it's not, and it's and of course it wasn't completely unusual or ludicrous in the 10th and 11th and 12th centuries for, particularly in that part of the world, and I mean we only have to go as far back as the Hanover electors in the 15 and 1600s with their British royal family to know that everyone was super closely related, and maybe a little closer related than is good for them. You know, that gene pool was starting to get properly shallow at one point. So, but it wasn't unusual to bring peace between 2 warring clans that were probably related 2 generations ago. So it wasn't an unusual thing for that to happen, but it's not an overt thing. We're not aware of anything happening except in Act 3, Sieglinde is now pregnant with Siegfried. So we put 2 and 2 together and come up with 4 and a bit.
This is an in-concert production, and based on some reading that I've done, it's actually performed in this way quite often. But what limitations does this put on the singers, the stars, simply singing in front of an orchestra without action or without costumes or scenery?
None. That's what I love about it. And I think that's part of the reason that Act 1 of Walküre gets performed in concert so frequently, because it's, give or take a bit, an hour, 65 minutes maybe, you know. And it is ostensibly, if you take just Act 1 in and of itself and don't refer it to anything that happens afterwards, it's the 65 minutes of a happy ending. You know, they go off into the sunset, seemingly with life ahead of them. So I think that's part of it. And in terms of, does it limit us? It doesn't really, because you get to focus on the intensity of, well, that's, the interesting thing is that with Wagner, there's always 2 things happening at the same time. The characters on stage will be singing to each other, and they'll be saying certain things, and they'll be saying it with a certain musical motive attached to that. But while ever they're saying those things with that motive attached to it, the orchestra is playing a motive that tells you what they're actually thinking. So, how many years, at least 60 or 70 years before Sigmund Freud, Wagner's saying, by the way, there's this thing called the subconscious, and I'm going to play it to you, so you know whatever they're saying to each other, they're actually thinking something, and here's what they're thinking. So, because there's an immediacy for concert versions of stuff, the audience get to hear and see, oh, you know, who are you that looks strangely like me? And then underneath, you'll hear the love motif already playing before they even realize what's going on. So the audience gets a much more immediate sense of how these characters relate to each other and how they're going to relate to each other in the 65th minute, which I think is really, he was pretty much the first composer to really do that. Here's what they're saying. Here are the words, here's the motive attached to those words, and here's what they're actually thinking. And I think a concert version of that gives an immediacy to that the all singing, all dancing sets, costumes, lights, stuff doesn't detract from, but it makes it slightly more impenetrable to get to the heart of what he was musically and poetically trying to say, I think.
Leitmotifs.
Yeah, leitmotifs, exactly. I mean, almost
those are
everything that happens, or any emotion, any remembrance, physical things have motifs attached to them. There's this wonderful motif, which becomes the Winterstürme, and when Siegmund and Sieglinde we haven't heard that melody, we haven't heard that motif yet, but there are places where that starts to play before they've even started to deal with who they are with each other. So there's all sorts of wonderful, and there's little, I guess the modern parlance is Easter eggs. When Siegmund in the first act is saying, I got separated from my dad and we were being chased, and then I searched everywhere, but I didn't find my father. Den Vater fand ich nicht. And as he finishes that, Den Vater fand ich nicht, the brass play, yam pam, ba bam bam bam, which is Wotan's Valhalla motif. So we know who his dad is, because Wagner's already said, by the way, his father's Wotan, which is genius without the characters on stage knowing that. The audience are in on the family history already.
Right. Or the joke.
Well, yeah, or in on the joke, you know.
That's marvelous. As you've performed the role of Siegmund before, to critical acclaim, award-winning acclaim, what inspires you to continue to portray this character?
I never get tired of singing him. I never do. There is something in this music that just makes it impossible to not want to keep singing it. And the other advantage, I guess, well, not advantage, but the other thing is that you get to sing it with different conductors and different orchestras and different colleagues. This will be the first time that Michelle and I have sung this together. We've sung lots of stuff together, but not this act of Walküre. There's just so many amazing musical highlights in Act One, and it's not all bombast. You know, it's very easy, and Wagner doesn't make it makes it easy. Doesn't make it easy. But it's very easy to see Wagner only as this big bombastic thing. But Act One is so full of such tenderness and such longing, Sehnsucht, and this questioning of like, who are you to me and why? Before they know what's going on, and the way he portrays some of that is truly remarkable. And I never get tired of listening to it or singing it or finding things in the score that maybe 50 performances ago was something I was, and then over time you focus on something else. So there's always something new in this score, in all of Wagner's scores, to reattach to and find a really good reason to want to keep singing it. And apart from that, it's a fun sing. It really is just an absolute ball to sing this hour or so like you're going to retire. You can sing it like you're going to retire that very day. And that's the fun part. So you don't have to, unlike Tristan, where you have to think, I've got this to do in Act 3. Act 1 of Walküre, announce your retirement. Just don't leave anything left. Sure. Leave it all on stage. Right. And you get to do that with this, which it's in my nature a little bit. And sometimes, you've got to stop yourself 3/4 of the way through. It's like you actually, you're not going to retire today. You go, oh, that's all right. But it's an absolute joy to sing it. It really is.
You mentioned the tenderness in Act 1 of Die Walküre, and I think it's fair to say that Humperdinck gleaned some of that from Wagner in Hansel and Gretel.
No question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Humperdinck was assisting Wagner in Bayreuth. At the same time, Felix Mottl was doing all the piano reductions. He does. He takes that sort of simple, or slightly more folk melody style of melody writing, but he draws on Wagner's use of orchestral forces. And that gorgeous duet between Hansel and Gretel, it's this very, very, very beautiful, quite charming, simple duet. But the way that even Humperdinck uses the orchestra to lift it to another plane, Wagner cast a very, very long shadow for good and bad, I suspect.
Big shoes.
Yeah.
Your specific voice type, Stuart, is especially appropriate for Wagnerian opera. Could you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a Helden tenor and what specific qualities does your Vach bring to this role?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because the whole concept of Helden tenor was applied retroactively. It didn't exist at the time. When Wagner was writing his operas, it wasn't about a particular voice type. It was the tenors who, the Friedrich Schnorr von Karlsfeld, the first Tristan, the stuff that he had been famous for before Tristan killed him. The mythology of him. Yeah, he had consumptive heart disease. Wouldn't matter what he was singing. He was going to die from it. But he was a famous Arnold and Guillaume Tell, and sang all the big late Belcanto, Bellini stuff. And Wagner was a huge Bellini fan. So there's this. The term Helden tenor, heroic tenor, I guess, is applied retroactively. The quality, I think it's stamina more than anything else. We don't have to sing louder than a Verdi tenor. We don't have to sing higher than a Rossini tenor. They all sing higher than we do. We might have to sing a little lower in the middle of the middle voice, a little bit more than Italianate and French singing. But the big deal is about making, well, at least for me, is making as beautiful a noise over that number of players for 4.5 hours. And if it's pretty but not quite loud enough sometimes, that's not on you. It can't be on you. Any one instrument in an orchestra can play louder than we can sing. And if you've got 95 of them on stage, that's a fight that's a fight you don't start, right? Because it's a fight you cannot win. So Wagner for me is always about it's all about singing what he means and singing dealing with the character that you are and character you're playing across the stage, about dealing with them in the moment in what it is that you're saying to each other, and making that as when it's supposed to be, making it as beautiful as possible. It's just you have to do it over 4.5 hours rather than 3 or 2.5. So it's being able to produce a certain number of decibels beautifully for a little bit longer.
Yeah, pacing plays a big part.
Pacing's a big part of it. Yeah. Knowing what it means to rest when you're singing Wagner, because resting in Wagner is different to resting in other repertoire. You can't really just come off the voice because you'll get tired equally, and that won't help. It's finding places where you don't have to give, and finding places where you don't have to, and knowing exactly what that means to give. Because in Wagner, it's easy to get excited and carried away and overcook things. Mm-hmm. So that's where the experience comes in. You go, don't overcook this. This is thrilling enough. Just relax.
To wrap up, what do you feel that the audience can still learn from Siegmund after all of these years?
Even the greatest of heroes don't always know why they're being heroic. It's just that they don't know any better. Siegmund isn't a hero apart from the fact that he does heroic things. He doesn't set himself up to be a hero. He says in the first act, everywhere I go, I try and defend people that need defending. I try and fight off people who are attacking people who are being attacked. And doesn't matter where I go and what I do, somebody in that equation gets upset with me. So he doesn't set out to be a hero because, well, this person needed defending. These people were being attacked and I helped them repel the attackers. And I think that's, he has heroic acts thrust upon him to a certain extent. And he doesn't really, he dies not really understanding why. when you're doing what he thinks is the right thing, there's always somebody who takes issue with it. And I think that's a really big lesson. If you are doing the right thing, there will be somebody who will take issue with you doing the right thing. And I strongly suspect if you're doing the right thing and there are people who are taking issue with it, you probably should keep doing it.
Stuart Skelton, thanks for joining us on Backstories this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
We look forward to hearing you on Saturday, the 13th of September at the Musical Arts Center.
I'm looking forward to it very much.
Toi, toi, toi.
Es wird schon schief gehen.